The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of a building that looked like it might collapse if someone sneezed too hard, and Norah Whitfield realized she'd made a terrible mistake. Dust swirled around her worn boots as she stepped down onto the hard-packed earth of Coldwater Springs, Wyoming territory, clutching a carpet bag that held everything she owned in the world. Behind her, the driver tossed down her trunk without ceremony, tipped his hat, and climbed back onto his bench like he couldn't leave fast enough. She stood alone in the middle of a street that looked more like a scar cut through the prairie, watching the stagecoach disappear into the distance. The town consisted of maybe 15 buildings, a general store, a saloon with peeling paint, a small church with a crooked steeple, and various structures that leaned into each other like drunks after a long night. Wind carried the smell of horse manure and wood smoke. Somewhere a dog barked, but she couldn't see a soul anywhere. Norah pulled the letter from her coat pocket for the 100th time since leaving Kansas City. The paper had gone soft from handling, the creases threatening to tear. Seeking wife. Rancher, widowed, one child, must be hardy and willing to work. Write to William Tate, Coldwater Springs, Wyoming territory. She'd written immediately. What choice did she have? After her father died and the bank took their farm, she'd spent 6 months working in a textile factory where the air turned your lungs black, and the foreman's hands wandered if you didn't keep your elbows sharp. When William Tate's response came, brief, practical, with train fare enclosed, she'd packed that same night. Now, standing in this godforsaken place, with the wind trying to steal her hat, she wondered if the factory might have been the better choice. "You must be Miss Whitfield." Norah turned. A woman stood in the doorway of the general store, wiping her hands on an apron. She was perhaps 50, with gray hair pulled back so tight it seemed to stretch her eyebrows upward. Her expression suggested she'd just bitten into something sour. "Yes, ma'am, I'm looking for..." William Tate's place is 6 miles north. Follow the main road until you see the turnoff marked with a pile of white stones. Can't miss it. The woman's eyes traveled over Norah's threadbare coat and scuffed boots. "Though I'll tell you now, you're wasting your time. Man doesn't want a wife. Never did." Norah's stomach dropped. But the letter... That letter was written by his daughter. Girl's 12 years old and thinks she needs a mother. The woman shook her head. "William didn't know about it until you'd already confirmed you were coming. Too much pride to tell you not to come after he'd sent money, I suppose. But make no mistake, he's not happy about this arrangement." The wind kicked up harder, and Norah had to grab her hat to keep it from flying away. Her throat felt tight. She'd spent her last dollar on a decent dress for the wedding. There was no money left for a return ticket, even if she'd had somewhere to return to. "Is there somewhere I can stay in town?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. The woman's expression softened slightly. "Nearest boarding house is in Riverton, 20 miles east. Nothing here but the saloon, and that's no place for a lady," she sighed. "You might as well go on out to the Tate place. Man's not cruel, just stubborn. Maybe he'll at least let you stay until you can figure out your next step." Norah wanted to sit down on her trunk and cry, but she'd learned years ago that tears didn't solve problems. "How do I get there? Is there someone who can take me?" "Jimmy," the woman called, and a boy of maybe 16 emerged from the back of the store. "Hitch up the wagon. Take this lady to the Tate Ranch." The ride took almost an hour over rough terrain that made Norah's teeth rattle. Jimmy didn't talk much, which suited her fine. She spent the time trying to figure out what she'd say when she met the man who hadn't actually asked her to come. The Tate Ranch appeared gradually over a rise, a main house that looked sturdy enough, built from timber with a stone chimney. Nearby stood a barn, a chicken coop, and several other outbuildings in various states of repair. Cattle dotted the distant hillsides, maybe 100 head. It wasn't a big operation, but it wasn't nothing either. A girl sat on the porch steps, shucking corn into a wooden bucket. She looked up as the wagon approached, and her face lit up like sunrise. "You came." She dropped the corn and ran toward them, braids flying. "I knew you'd come. Pa said you probably wouldn't, but I knew." "Emma," a man emerged from the barn, and Norah's breath caught. William Tate was tall and weathered, maybe 35, with dark hair that needed cutting and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite. He wore work clothes stained with dirt and sweat, and his eyes, grey as a winter's sky, held all the warmth of one too. He walked toward the wagon with the slow, deliberate gait of a man heading toward an unpleasant task. "Mr. Tate," Norah climbed down before Jimmy could help her. "I'm Norah Whitfield." "I know who you are." His voice was deep and rough around the edges. "Emma, go inside." "But Pa." "Inside, now." The girl's face fell, but she obeyed, casting one hopeful glance back at Norah before disappearing through the front door. William turned to Jimmy. "Appreciate you bringing her out. I'll settle up with your ma next time I'm in town." Jimmy nodded and flicked the reins, leaving Norah alone with a man who looked like he'd rather face a grizzly bear than talk to her. Silence stretched between them. Norah forced herself to stand straight, to meet his eyes even though her stomach was churning. She'd come too far to crumble now. "I understand this wasn't your idea," she said finally. The woman at the store explained, "I'm sorry for the trouble." "Not your fault." He looked past her toward the mountains in the distance. "Girl had no right to do what she did, but what's done is done. I can leave. If you could loan me enough for a train ticket, I'll pay you back once I find work." "And go where?" Now his eyes met hers, sharp and assessing. "You got family somewhere?" "No." "Job waiting for you?" "No." He pulled off his hat, ran a hand through his hair, and cursed under his breath. "Stay the night. We'll figure something out tomorrow." It wasn't kind, but it wasn't cruel either. Norah nodded, grateful for even that small mercy. Emma appeared in the doorway again the moment her father walked away toward the barn. She rushed out to help Norah with her trunk, chattering the whole time. "I picked wildflowers for your room. It's not much, but it's clean. Pa built the house himself after Ma died. That was 4 years ago. He doesn't talk about her much. I do all the cooking, but I'm not very good at it. Pa says my biscuits could be used for ammunition." She grinned. Gap-toothed and hopeful. "I know Pa seems mean, but he's not really. He's just sad. I thought maybe if you came, he'd smile again." Norah's heart broke a little. "Emma, honey. I know he didn't want me to write to you, but I had to do something. He's been alone so long, and I'm not enough." The girl's voice dropped to a whisper. "Sometimes I hear him at night, packing. He doesn't sleep much." They reached the porch, and Norah set down her end of the trunk. Through the open door, she could see a simple interior, rough furniture, clean floors, a stone fireplace, everything functional and plain, like a place where people survived rather than lived. "Let me show you your room," Emma said, pulling her inside. Norah didn't sleep well that first night. The bed was comfortable enough, better than the factory boarding house, but her mind wouldn't settle. Every few hours she'd hear footsteps in the hall, the creak of floorboards as William paced. Emma was right. The man didn't sleep. At dawn, she rose and dressed in her work clothes, a simple calico dress that had seen better days. If she only had one night here, she'd at least earn her keep. The kitchen was cold and empty. She found the stove, got a fire going, and began searching for what she'd need to make breakfast. The pantry was surprisingly well stocked. Flour, bacon, eggs from the chickens she'd seen. She set to work, letting muscle memory guide her. Her mother had taught her to cook before the fever took her, and Norah had fed her father for 10 years after that. She was pulling biscuits from the oven when Emma stumbled in, rubbing sleep from her eyes. The girl stopped, staring. "You made breakfast. Seemed like the least I could do." Emma's face lit up, and she ran to the window. "Pa's coming in from the barn. He's gonna be so surprised." William entered a few minutes later, stopping in the doorway when he saw the table set with plates of bacon, eggs, and biscuits. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Wasn't necessary," he said. "I know," Norah poured coffee into a tin cup, "but I'm used to working for my keep." He sat down slowly, and Emma practically bounced into her chair. They ate in silence at first, but Norah watched William cut into a biscuit, watched his jaw work as he chewed. He reached for a second one before he'd finished the first. "These are good," Emma whispered to her. "Pa's eating too." After breakfast, William pushed back from the table. I've got fence that needs mending in the north pasture. Be gone most of the day. He looked at Norah. You don't have to stay if you want Jimmy to come back for you. I'll stay, she heard herself say, at least for a bit. Help out around here while I figure out my next step, if that's acceptable. He studied her for a long moment, and she couldn't read his expression at all. Finally, he nodded once and grabbed his hat from the peg by the door. The days began to blur together. Norah fell into a routine, rising early to make breakfast, tending the vegetable garden that Emma had tried to maintain, mending clothes, cleaning the house. Emma followed her everywhere, talking constantly, teaching her about the ranch and the animals and her father. He used to laugh more, Emma said one afternoon while they were hanging laundry. Before Ma died, they danced sometimes right here in the kitchen. He'd sing this song, can't remember the words now, but he doesn't sing anymore. That must be hard for you. It's hard for him more. Emma pinned up one of her father's shirts. People in town think he should marry again. Mrs. Henderson at the store, she's got a niece who keeps trying to bring him pies, but he won't even look at her, says he's done with that part of his life. Norah's chest tightened. Then why did he let me stay? Because he's not mean. Emma looked at her seriously. And maybe because you don't push, everyone else pushes. William remained distant but not unkind. He ate the meals she cooked, nodded his thanks when she repaired his torn coat, and once, just once, she caught him watching her in the garden with an expression that might have been something other than indifference. But when their eyes met, his face closed up again and he turned away. At night, she still heard him packing. 3 weeks after her arrival, a storm rolled in from the north. Norah saw it coming from the kitchen window, clouds the color of bruises, moving fast. She just put stew on for supper when Emma burst through the door. Pa's out with the cattle. They're scattered up in the high pasture, and he went to bring them down before the storm hits. Norah looked at the darkening sky. How long ago? Hours, maybe more. The wind was already picking up, rattling the shutters. Norah made a decision. Stay inside, keep the stew warm. I'm going to take him a coat and some coffee. But I've been in storms before, Emma. I'll be fine. She bundled up in her heaviest shawl, grabbed William's oilcloth coat from the peg, and filled a flask with hot coffee. The first drops of rain hit her face as she headed toward the barn to saddle one of the horses. The mare was gentle enough, and Norah could ride. Her father had taught her young. She urged the horse toward the high pasture, following the path Emma had described. The rain came harder, soaking through her shawl, and thunder rolled across the hills like God moving furniture. She found him a mile out, on foot, leading his horse. The animal was limping badly. When he saw her coming, his expression shifted from surprise to anger. "What the hell are you doing out here?" he had to shout over the wind. "Bringing you this," she held up the coat. "You could have been thrown, struck by lightning, drowned in a wash." He grabbed the reins of her horse, his hand shaking, though whether from cold or fury she couldn't tell. "Get back to the house." "Not without you." They stood there glaring at each other, rain streaming down their faces. Then William shook his head, took the coat, and pulled it on. "My horse threw a shoe. We'll have to ride double." He climbed up behind her, one arm coming around her waist to hold the reins. Norah felt the solid weight of him, the heat of his body even through the wet clothes. Her heart hammered against her ribs. They rode back in silence, the storm raging around them. By the time they reached the barn, they were both soaked to the bone. William slid down first, then helped her dismount. His hands lingered on her waist for just a moment. "That was foolish," he said quietly. "I know. Could have gotten yourself killed. I know that too. Why'd you do it?" She met his eyes, and the truth came out before she could stop it. "Because I care what happens to you." Something passed between them then, some current she couldn't name. His hand came up as if to touch her face, but he caught himself, dropped it, stepped back. "Get inside, get dry." His voice was rough. "I'll tend the horses." That night, the packing stopped. Norah lay in bed listening to the rain against the roof, and for the first time since her arrival, The house was quiet. She didn't know what it meant, but something had shifted. In the morning, she found William in the kitchen. He'd made coffee, badly, and was standing at the window watching the sunrise paint the wet landscape gold. "Thank you," he said without turning around, "for yesterday." "You're welcome. I haven't been fair to you." He turned then, and his face looked different somehow, less hard. "You've worked harder than any hired hand, and I've barely spoken 10 words to you that weren't necessary. You didn't ask me to come." "No, but you're here, and you've made things better." He paused, struggling with something. "Emma's happier. The house feels different, warmer." Norah's pulse quickened. "I'm glad." "My wife," he started again. "I loved her. When she died, I thought that part of me died too, wasn't interested in feeling anything again, hurt too much." "I understand." "Do you?" His grey eyes held hers. "Because I'm starting to think maybe I was wrong. Maybe there's room for something else, someone else." He took a breath. "If you're willing to stay, not as a hired hand, as what you came here to be." The words hung in the air between them. Outside, a meadowlark sang its morning song. "I'm willing," Norah said softly, "but I need to know, are you asking because it's practical, because Emma needs a mother and you need help with the ranch, or is there more to it?" William crossed the space between them slowly, and when he reached her, he took her hand. His palm was calloused and warm. "I'm asking," he said, "because when you rode out into that storm yesterday, something in my chest cracked wide open. I'm asking because I haven't slept through the night in 4 years, but last night I did. I'm asking because when I think about you leaving, it feels like losing daylight." Norah felt tears prick her eyes. "That's more than practical. It's terrifying is what it is." A small smile, the first she'd seen from him, touched his mouth. "I'm not good at this. Haven't courted anyone since I was 17, but if you'll be patient with me." She kissed him, just pressed her lips to his, soft and quick, before she could lose her nerve. When she pulled back, William looked stunned. Then his hand came up to cup her face, gentle as anything, and he kissed her back properly, slow and sweet and full of promise. "Is that a yes?" he murmured against her mouth. "That's a yes." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church with the crooked steeple. Emma stood beside Norah in a new dress, beaming like the sun. Half the town came, including Mrs. Henderson from the general store, who pursed her lips but brought a pie anyway. The preachers spoke about commitment and faith and building a life together, but Norah barely heard him. She was too aware of William beside her, his hand warm in hers, his thumb tracing slow circles on her palm. When the preacher said they could kiss, William pulled her close and whispered, "Thank you for being stubborn." She laughed against his mouth, "Thank you for being worth it." Winter came hard and early that year. By November, snow had drifted against the barn doors and ice hung from the eaves like crystal teeth. Norah had never experienced a Wyoming winter before, and the cold cut through everything, relentless and mean. But inside the house, there was warmth. She and William fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side, learning each other's habits, building something solid. He taught her to read the weather and mend harness leather. She taught him that it was okay to talk about his first wife, that memory wasn't betrayal. Emma flourished, no longer carrying the weight of the household alone. She laughed more, played more, started writing stories in a journal Norah had given her. One night in late December, with snow falling outside and firelight dancing on the walls, Norah sat mending while William worked on his account books. Emma had gone to bed an hour earlier. "I've been thinking," William said, not looking up from his figures, "about expanding the herd next spring, maybe getting some sheep too." "That's ambitious." "Got reason to be ambitious now." He set down his pencil and looked at her. "Got something worth building for." Norah set aside her mending and moved to sit beside him. "Tell me something. That night I rode out in the storm, what were you really thinking?" "Honestly," he pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. "I was thinking I'd kill you myself for being so reckless, and then I was thinking I'd never felt so afraid in my life. And then, When we were riding back with you in front of me, I was thinking I didn't want to let you go. You almost touched my face in the barn. I wanted to," his voice went quiet, "wanted to do more than that, but I didn't know if I had the right." "You have the right now." He turned her face toward his and kissed her, deeper this time, with all the hunger he'd been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you," he said, rough and urgent. "Didn't plan to, fought it like hell, but I love you, Norah." She'd been waiting to hear those words since the day she'd arrived in Coldwater Springs, half frozen and unwanted. Now they filled up every empty place inside her. "I love you too," she whispered. "Loved you even when you were stubborn and silent and glaring at me from across the barn." He laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was like sun breaking through clouds. "We make quite a pair." "Yes," she said, kissing him again. "We do." Spring came eventually, the way it always does. The snow melted, revealing brown grass that would green up soon. Calves were born, strong and kicking. Norah's garden, carefully planned through the winter, began to show the first tender shoots. One morning in April, she stood on the porch watching William and Emma work with a new horse in the corral. The girl sat on the fence rail, shouting encouragement, while her father patiently led the mare in circles. Mrs. Henderson's wagon appeared on the road, and Norah waved as the woman drove up. "Morning," Mrs. Henderson said, climbing down with surprising agility for someone her age. "Brought some fabric. Thought you might want to make yourself a new dress." "That's kind of you." The older woman's face softened. "I'll admit, I didn't think it would work. When you first came to town, I thought you'd be gone in a week. Thought William would send you packing." "He almost did." "But you stayed, wore him down." Mrs. Henderson smiled. "Girl's got her father back. House has life in it again. And William, well, I saw him in town last week, and he was actually whistling. Haven't heard that man whistle in years." Norah felt warmth spread through her chest. "We are happy." "Can see that. Sometimes the best things are the ones we don't plan for." She handed over the fabric, a pretty blue calico that would make a fine dress. "You did good, Norah Tate, real good." After Mrs. Henderson left, Norah stayed on the porch, watching her family. William looked up, caught her eye, and smiled. That smile she'd worked so hard to earn that came easier now. He said something to Emma, who jumped down from the fence and ran toward the house. "Pa says come down," the girl called. "He wants to show you how good the new mare is doing." Norah walked down into the sunlight, into the life she'd built from nothing but stubbornness and hope. William met her halfway, took her hand, and pulled her close for a quick kiss that made Emma giggle. "What do you think?" he asked, gesturing at the mare. "I think she's beautiful." "She is," but he wasn't looking at the horse. He was looking at her. "Emma and I were talking, thinking maybe we should change the ranch's name, call it the Homestead instead of the Tate Place. Make it clear this is all our home now." Emma nodded eagerly. "Because you're part of it. You're not just staying here, this is yours too." Norah's throat went tight. She'd come to Wyoming territory as a mail-order bride nobody wanted, with nothing but a worn carpet bag and a heart full of desperation. She'd expected rejection, maybe charity if she was lucky. Instead, she'd found this, a man who'd learned to love again, a girl who needed a mother, a ranch that was becoming something more than just a place to survive. She'd found a home. "The homestead," she said, testing the words. "I like that." William's arm came around her waist, solid and sure. Emma grabbed her other hand, warm and trusting. They stood there together, watching the mare canter around the corral, the morning sun bright on the mountains. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Norah Whitfield Tate knew exactly where she belonged.